All right, today we are talking about carbohydrates. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is maybe media tries to make carbohydrates seem like the devil, that if you're eating them, you're going to get fat right away. And I have to say that's a complete myth, that if you eat carbohydrates, you're probably not going to get fat. It's going to be more so eating them in excess. So what happens is carbohydrates are rather easy to eat in excess. If you think about it, you can snack it on the chips, eating the rice, potatoes. It's just easy to put in your belly. And that's why they get their finger pointed at. But them in itself, you shouldn't point your finger at carbohydrates if you're gaining weight. You should point your finger at the fact that you're simply eating too much food. So first off, our bodies need carbohydrates. Our brain, entire nervous system, and red blood cells, it's essential that we have carbohydrates. And when we stop eating carbohydrates, our body makes up for it by converting two carbohydrates in the body known as glucose in the body. So looking at the two different branches of carbohydrates broken into two parts here, we have simple and we have complex. So simple carbohydrates are going to be much more sugar dense, like candy bars, cookies, and all the way even to white rice, just because there's not much else. So like a simple characteristic here about simple carbohydrate is the glycemic index. So this is your body's response to breaking it down. And realistically, when we're trying to factor in like how your body's actually responding to it, we look at that in glycemic load. That determines the amount of that food you're eating and what else you're eating it with, because your body's going to respond differently to both of those things. So what is glycemic index? This is pretty much how aggressively your insulin response is to the food you're eating. So if you're eating a Snickers bar, super high in sugar, your body's going to have to release a pretty large amount of insulin to get it back under control. So that's the glycemic response, and that leaves you with the burst of energy that eating those high sugary, simple carbohydrate foods leave you with. And then that's why like you give a kid a candy bar, he's freaking out like 5 minutes later. Then complex carbohydrates. If you look at a textbook's going to tell you you should only eat carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates are the devil, but that's partially true. So first off, they have a low glycemic response in the body. The glycemic index of these foods are rather low, way less sugar, and a lot higher micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, you name it. And they're a lot harder to digest, and that's in part just because there's a lot of fiber in these foods, so it goes through our body much slower, which is good, I guess, for some. If you're trying to find that long, sustained meal throughout the day, complex carbohydrates are going to be your friend. But then the main thing here is simple carbohydrates aren't necessarily the devil. Like white rice, yes, it's a simple carbohydrate. The micronutrient value and fiber value in it is extremely low. But if you're somebody needing to hit a large amount of calories in a day, you're going to have to eat some form of simple carbohydrates. Because if I were to try and eat only complex carbohydrate, I'd probably be eating for 6 hours a day because I'd have to chomp down 10 plates of broccoli. It's just unrealistic. That's why you have to eat some form of simple carbohydrates for most of us out there. Then the last thing, the only time I would probably suggest somebody eating pretty low total amount of carbohydrate is if you're sedentary. And you're probably not listening to this video if you are sedentary, but that's simply because the energy expenditure is so low that we don't need to fuel anything. So if you got any questions, go ahead and slide.